Sorry, I have to blow the dust off the microphone, and also a little bit of cat hair too. I appreciate it's been about 6 months since my last video. Luna, where have you been, Loca? Well, would you believe me if I told you I do have 3.5-ish other video essays that are drafts at the minute? But, well, they're drafts at the minute, and the fact that I have 3.5 and none of them are complete, disgusting. I'm sorry for leaving you for so long. But I thought I want to keep the channel active, obviously, because it's going to have things, just not in a timely schedule, apparently. I can't do genius creatively on a schedule, but I thought something that could just keep it flowing would be if I just did some reviews of movies I've been watching. So last year, I got a subscription to the cinema, and I've been trying to watch movies that aren't just your standard Disney, Pixar, Scorsese. That one's actually a lie because I have been watching Scorsese because it's cinema. But it means that I've been watching some more interesting things as well, some more niche things, some less talked about things. And why not make reviews of them? So, welcome to the first video of Moth-Eaten Reels. The name could change, the logo could change, but we have to start somewhere, or we won't do anything at all, and then it will stay empty, and I will stay embarrassed about my 3.5 drafts. So, for episode 1 of this new project, this new movie review thing that I'm doing, we're going to be talking about Emerald Fennell's Saltburn. So, at the time of recording this version, I want to talk about it. At the time of recording, Saltburn is available to stream on Amazon Prime, I believe. Definitely in the UK it is. So you can go away, watch it, form your own opinions, and then come back. And then feel free to go, Luna, what are you talking about? Even though you've watched it. So it was through all of my frequent trips to the cinema that I first saw the trailer for this. I maybe saw it twice, and on the second time I thought, I've got to watch this. The trailer was really mysterious. It really didn't reveal an awful lot. There were lots of just vibes-based shots, I guess. It was a lot of sequences of just a summer and a club, maybe. Lots of flashing lights, lots of dress up, I guess. Had that kind of Skins vibe, or maybe Gossip Girl? Maybe. Just this kind of opulent, rich kid, careless, uni or high school party thing going on. And it had Jacob Elordi, and I only know him from Euphoria as that boy who is a bad boy, and Barry Keoghan, who I mostly know from Banshees of Inisherin and Marvels, and it's focused on these two and just these exchanges of dialogue. And it really did not give much away at all. I came away from it having no idea who were the antagonists or the protagonists. And it intrigued me. It intrigued me a lot. It looked really juicy. It looked like a visual spectacle. So the film is set within a framed story. The opening scene gives us these smoky close-ups as Oliver, played by Barry Keoghan, tells us of this love that he has for this boy Felix, Jacob Elordi. We then flash back to the tale the framed story sits in. We first meet Oliver in his first year of Oxford. He walks through a campus alone, so we can see he doesn't fit in. Just settles under this banner saying, "Welcome class of 2006. He finds companionship in this boy, Felix, Jacob Elordi, who sort of forces himself on him as a friend. He insists that Oliver hang out with him after a chance encounter where Oliver helps Felix, who is clearly an upper class, popular boy, and they begin to bond. Ollie talks about his family issues, his alcoholic parents, and Felix offers him the opportunity to hang out in his social circle with his friends. And at this time, again, it's kind of like the trailer. You don't know really what's gonna happen. You can see just the codependency is forming. Jacob Elordi just plays such a good popular boy, I suppose. Again, I know him from Euphoria. I know him as the bad boy in that, but honestly, as Felix, he's just so exuberant. I think he's honestly like the golden retriever puppy, but also he's got this little eyebrow piercing. A bunch of the early shots, I feel, definitely have that pointed towards the camera. So you know that he's not just like upper class aristocratic boy at Oxford, but also like still cool, you know? Like obviously he wants to chat to Oliver, who is coded by accent, I think I would say. This is another thing about this movie. It's very British, but like I don't really know how to elaborate because it's not like Shaun of the Dead British humor exactly. Like I don't think Britishness would like turn people off or make them feel excluded. However, we will get back to this as I talk about it, but there has been a lot of chatter online that I just take as wild misinterpretations. I am like happy to see people talk about class, but I am like, I don't think you know what you're talking about with this movie. Not that I know either. You know, I don't really know anything about Oxford university culture or the aristocracy. I try to ignore them, almost like a petty get back of how they ignore me, because if I can't have their money, I want to have their delusion. I think there's something interesting about this early codependency as well, in the weirdly, what it does remind me of personally is kind of toxic girl friendships in high school, just that kind of almost charitable, oh, you're our funny little friend. I don't know. Is this revealing too much about me? Was it just me who was the funny little friend? Maybe it was. Oh dear. Um, we see that in this codependent relationship where it is more Felix is looking after Oliver. Oliver is his little charity case, is how it feels. Again, when he talks about his parents, he has this kind of probing, gossipy concern for him. Again, this kind of reminds me more of female friendships in high school where it didn't feel truly sympathetic. It didn't always feel like, oh, I want you to open up to me so that we can talk about our problems together. A problem shared is a problem halved. But this kind of probing, just wanting the scoop, the way that they're at a table together when Oliver is opening up about his parents being alcoholic and how he's had to grow up with those difficulties. And the way that Jacob Elordi just plays such a good flippin' Chad with Felix going, oh, that sounds awful. Was it awful? The answer is quite obvious, so why do you phrase it this way? But you know, some people do that. And again, it reminds me of female friendships at high school. Good toxicity. I like it. I am already engaged in the juiciness of where the heck this relationship is going to go. And again, Felix is more interested in him as a charity case. He knows that he's not fitting in to his friendship group without him. There's a few sequences of people that he is talking to, and Oliver is more trailing behind, like a little puppy dog, like a little accessory. The girls are way more interested in Felix. It's something that's in the opening narration as well when he's talking about Felix from this smoky framed perspective. He does single out, oh, the girls, they're always fawning over him. So I was also taking a little bit of some petty homoerotic jealousy, mayhap. just what I was taking at the time. But we see how Felix abandons Oliver at these parties. We see how he deliberately will go after hooking up with girls who then one of his other friends will say something about how they wanted to get with her. And so he was not very sportsmanlike or something. They are horrible people. It's Oxford University and it's 2006 and a bunch of these boys are just, they're totally from Eton. You just know, again, this is British film in this way, in this cultural way. And oh, this is so obnoxious to listen to and I kind of love it. I would love going into a film and just thinking, I hate you all. I hate you all. We go through their entire first year of Oxford together, Felix and Oliver, and also with this other character, Farley, who I love. Farley is clearly close to Felix. We first see him with Oliver in this scene that highlights how much of an outsider he is, even academically, where he presents an essay, My Last Duchess, the cliche. I love it, but I hate it. But I love it. And Farley immediately rides on in with his flippin' credentials, which is basically the professor knew his mother. And so even though he's got nothing to say and he's late, really, the professor is immediately more willing to listen to his criticisms, even though they're shallow, and critiquing the style over the substance. And so I need to point out this early interaction because throughout this film, Farley and Oliver are my favorites. They are the best for just these really tense scenes of antagonism, but it feels so kind of sexually charged every time. I don't know what it is. Not at this stage of the film, anyway. But we see the tension of their codependent relationship that then finally culminates when Oliver says regarding his parents that, well, my dad's died and it was alcohol related. And so Felix is then, after a more tense night before where he kind of abandons him again, he's immediately then looking after Oliver again. He's there for him. He's letting him in. He's the shoulder to cry on. And he introduces him to this ritual that his family have where they write the name of the departed on a rock and throw it into the river as like a goodbye. So that's very intimate, you know, like a personal family ritual. And they do that together. And this is one of the main things said about this film, while it's part of its genre, is that it's meant to be a kind of black comedy, like a satire, all these things that basically it's funny. It's really dark, but it's also really humorous. So with the rock scene, it's not that funny, Jesus. But with the rock, when he throws it into the river, it smacks against the side into a puddle of vomit and an empty wine bottle. I somehow didn't see this when I watched it at the cinema. I missed where the rock was. I was too grossed out by the vomit. So after this bonding of this ritual that his family go through with and he's introduced to Oliver, he also then says, come back with me to my family house at summer so you don't have to be alone with this tragedy with your mum, who you say is just as bad with the alcoholism. Come back with me to Saltburn. When he says this, Oliver's like, I don't want to impose. I can't. And Felix says, oh, impose? Fuck off with that shit. You'll be saving my sanity. He's very insistent on it. Like, it's not Oliver who is in control in this scene. It's Felix absolutely insisting. And so Oliver has been invited. And this firm invitation is important for a big thing that will be revealed later on, I feel. because the director has said about this being a vampire movie is something I came across, and I'm so glad I came across it because I kind of thought it at the time, but I didn't pick up on things like this explicit invitation. So, their time at Oxford first year is done, and we go into Saltburn House. So he arrives at Saltburn through the front gate. I had an expectation, I think, that Saltburn would be a much more imposing house. I feel like in similar movies with this kind of country house, distant, separated from society, enclosed space, often the house itself has this kind of intimidating character with just high walls and some gothic spires maybe, but I feel like to look at from a distance, Saltburn House kind of ended up like a little bit flat looking. Still this magnificent country house, obviously with a lot of history, but not what I expected for sure. What was imposing was then the grounds. Oliver walks through the main entrance, and it looks like the kind of place where you would be maybe traditionally a long time ago driven in on a horse and carriage, that kind of wide flat pathway. And then his tiny figure walking through, as I say, this long flat road. That looks very, he looks small. He looks, again, like he doesn't really belong. He looks very awkward. It makes you uncomfortable to look at. And especially, what does then strike a chord with some of these gothic country house tales is that the person to open the door to him when he just knocks on the door, as I say, in this estate where really you would expect the doors to already be open because any entrance that you're going to make through the main entrance is going to be a very pre-planned grand entrance. And Oliver just walks up, and Duncan, the housekeeper, the main butler, opens the door, and he looks quite ghostly. He's got that proper kind of ghoulish butler look to him. Just very dark eyes and slick backed hair, and the uniform very stiff. And he's very stiff when he sees Oliver, tells him, "We sent someone for you. You're an hour early." And the funny thing about all of the actors that they have in the main roles of this film is that they are very intimidating presences. You know, they all have the ability to have this very kind of reptilian, cold aura. Like, if you tried to get into a staring contest with any single one of them, you would lose, like, instantly. But the mad thing is, as well, that they can all just switch. Like, I love the freaking power of these actors to then have this ability. So Oliver, in this moment with the butler, just looks like a kicked puppy. He just looks so awkward and trembling, and his flippin' blue eyes look so watery, like he's made the biggest mistake, and then he just wants to run, which you would in this situation, where, as I said, he's already done this long walk that he should have known as he was walking did not feel right. But suddenly, behind Duncan, there's Felix, his angel, his savior, again, because he says to him, "Duncan, don't be so scary," or something along those lines, and starts immediately sweeping Oliver through the house, showing him all of the things that he will come to expect this summer, the opulence, all of the valuables, but in this very flippant way, like he doesn't really care. He's basically trying to give Oliver a layout of the house, but the finery, all of that, he's not interested in it, so he's not really focusing on it to Oliver. And I feel as well, again, I saw something to say that they really wanted to highlight the just extravagantly opulent house, but I didn't get that. I feel that this walkthrough is quite, you're watching Oliver watch things, and he definitely is then impressed by all of this. Again, Felix is waltzing through the house just like, oh, dead rallies, oh, carpet. I don't think he's super enthusiastic about carpet or anything. But again, I struggle to remember because he's just so casual about it. Oliver looks mesmerized as he's walking through. But even then, as I say, we're watching Oliver is how it feels. For me, the house doesn't look particularly, wow, oh my god, stunning. It kind of just looks formal and stiff. And again, I wonder if this is like maybe just a personal thing for me, that I just like to be nosy about rich people's houses. So ghost tours are a great excuse to go be nosy at some rich people's houses and some galleries. Like I live near Bath Spa, for Christ's sake. There's just a lot of these older houses that there's an excuse for the public to go in them. So, that don't impress me much. But Oliver is impressed, and that's the important thing. We're then introduced to Felix's family. We have Venetia, his sister, Farley, who is staying with them, who is his cousin. We have his mother, Elspeth, played by Rosamund Pike, and his father, Jacob Catton, played by Richard E. Grant. And they're there with a family friend, Pamela, played by Carey Mulligan. I did not recognize her in this role. Okay, so an aside, there's that sequence in Spy Kids, bear with me, right at the beginning, where she just changes wigs a lot and she just becomes a different person. But it's true though. I'm so bad with faces. I can't recognize people if they stick a wig on. So Carey Mulligan is there with this long red curly wig like a Russian doll or something. And she's there and involved in the conversation until Elspeth then just slyly dismisses her. I can't even remember what she said. It is horrible. It is that feeling of someone just being so good at talking the talk and the power imbalance that they can just say something that is not really horrible, but it definitely then gives you that dismissal. And so she dismisses Pamela like that. And then immediately zooms in on Oliver, a new toy for the house, is how it feels. Because much like earlier, when Felix is probing Oliver, oh, that sounds awful, was it awful? Elspeth is on another level. Like, we immediately then see that Felix is his mother's child, but she goes straight in there with this knowledge that Oliver's dad has just died of a drug overdose or an alcohol overdose. Either way, she then immediately starts making it about her when she says, I've lost so many friends to addiction, so many dear, dear friends. I just love her character so much. She just, I wouldn't say she steals every scene that she's in, but every time that she is highlighted in a scene, it is just shocking. I would say as well, she has the funniest lines, and a lot of it comes from just this kind of shocking, the shock of the things that she says, and the clear intention of them being nice things or concerning things, that I feel just very instantly that we get the vibes that she is that kind of person who, you know, everyone sees themselves as a good person, but to her, it's important that she feels like a good person and that everyone sees her as a good person. Another element of the scene that isn't all about her being that way, but also about Richard E. Grant's character, Jacob, because straight away, Oliver is, again, he is very impressed by the household, even though I am apparently a rotten bitch who is not. But he immediately goes in with the, oh, thank you, sir. And they say, no, sirs, we're very casual, we're very welcoming. I don't think those are the exact words they say, again, because they are just so good at that double speak of being very courteous, but also wanting you to then feel that they are definitely very charitable and nice people, even though, again, they want to feel good. They are not necessarily nice people at heart. And again, so people I have seen have this opinion by the end of the film that the Catton family are nice people who you should feel sorry for. Where? their first introduction when you see this dynamic. I am concerned for you. I think you should talk to somebody. Especially when immediately following this scene, where, as I said, Pamela, their friend who's staying with them for an indeterminate amount of time. In the next scene, it is a dinner scene, and the dinner scenes, I think, are so important in this movie. But this one, the awkwardness, that is in pretty much all the dinner scenes, the awkwardness is mostly on Pamela, who then is apparently in this position of being grateful to the Cattons and under their roof because of an ex-boyfriend, and she's just staying with them until she gets back on her feet. Again, we don't know how long she's been there, but it's implied to have been for quite a long time. And when she mentions something to do with maybe being able to find a flat soon, Elspeth immediately jumps at what a great opportunity that would be. And again, it's all about her. So she also has to fit in. This Lady Catton, living in her big wide house with all of these paintings and all the finery and whatnot, she says that it would be really lovely to live in a flat. So nice to have such a small space and so much less to clean. So freeing to live in one room, I think is the exact line. I do not remember. I do not have a script in front of me. However, Pamela does still then seem a little bit hesitant, especially when then Elspeth also has to add in, "Oh, I'll be so sorry to see you go." We have the classic cringe of misinterpretation when then Pamela goes on to say, "Oh, I know, I could stay a little bit longer," prompting Elspeth and Jacob to go, no, you really should get back on your feet. During this conversation, I believe there is some standard dinner talk. Specifically, they start referencing Percy Shelley. And when Pamela says, "Who's that?" it's not an immediately catty response, but there is obviously the disbelief from these people who are so cultured in this position, saying, "Percy Shelley, the famous poet." I think there's also, when she's talking about, again, her gratitude to the Cattons keeping her under the roof, the way that she talks about her ex-Russian man who's got her into this position of not having her own home to live in. The way that she talks about the misunderstandings. I think there's a line, something along the lines of when he was telling her things in Russian and she says something like, "I didn't know the Russian word for whore. I thought it was beautiful poetry or something." And just the framing of it, just making her look so thick. So again, just someone that the Cattons are looking down on, just the charity case, that the pity for her is what has kept her interesting. But again, during this conversation, we see that she has kind of clearly outstayed her welcome. But she's telling all of these things to Oliver. Oliver, who has also come under this roof because of Felix's pity for him. Again, I say Felix is his mother's son. I feel the parallel is right there, right immediately. So again, why do people keep saying that they feel sorry for the Cattons? Farley is also at this dinner again. He is definitely also staying for the summer, is all we can see from this. And nothing is immediately catty from Farley to Oliver, but because of their past, we already know that there may be tension. There is going to be tension because Farley wanted Felix to stay away from Oliver. Not in a kind of firm way, but because of the earlier tension at Oxford between the professor and also a couple of other incidents. Farley is also never away from Felix at university unless Oliver's managed to get him alone, is what it looks like. And so the tension is not bubbling yet, but the yet is so stiff in the air. Again, at these dinner scenes, there's just always something awkward. I love that we get into an entire music video of the summer. I think that it really is one of the best scenes for just painting how much this film is vibes. Because, again, I know that it's part of then the kind of country house tradition that it's an isolated area away from anything else grounding a kind of sense of time or reality. But the fact that they even use a song that came out, I had to look this up. They use a song that came out a little bit after the time period the film is set in. It's MGMT Time to Pretend, and I think it came out maybe like a year or two after this summer in 2007. And it's just, if you have memories from 2006, then this song can play in the background and just absolutely tell you what the year is on its own. Which, again, is funny because I looked up and it's not from 2006, 2007. It's from 2008. But God, there are so many set pieces. Heart-shaped red sunglasses, the wine, the lollies, the flippin' razzle-dazzle that Venetia, the sister, is wearing during a tennis match. I could not. I would be sweating and dripping and disgusting. They're lying on the lawn. The lawn itself is just this saturated, almost limey green. There's such a filter over everything that really just, again, it is the music video section of the movie, but it also really then pushes the fact that the whole movie is going for this kind of like dreamy, hazy state. It really does then feel like, I don't know, the last time that you were in school and lying on a field. It just does. And again, just 2006 had other elements of innocence to it, which I will blame social media for. Because the setting of 2006 as well, it was before Facebook domination. It was before all of these things that allowed us to then just feel like we were able to live a full life with a screen, you know? And it also kind of has that hazy feel for people my age, I guess, personally, because it's a time we sort of remember, but don't remember. And again, it sits in that kind of dreamy space where things were a lot less complicated, but there was also kind of a fair few socially progressive policies going through that made a few things that would have been taboo or definitely would have made you a social pariah just then not really be on that level anymore. I think. I don't know. In all honesty, I was a sprog in 2006. And if I have any right at all to call this an age of innocence, the next scene shatters that. It's not a shattering of innocence per se. However, this is the scene that everybody is talking about. This is the scene that has people saying that the movie is just very crazy and makes people lose their minds. It shouldn't be, I think, when we think about the other scenes, but it is. So after our floaty music video, we cut to the bathroom with Oliver preparing for a bath, maybe? Either way, through his perspective, Oliver finds the bathroom door that they share ajar to see Felix masturbating. He chooses to watch, and then when Felix walks out to bid him goodnight, after a slight cut, he then goes to the bath to slide his face down by the drain and slurp the remaining water with Felix's sperm in it. And the scene lingers. If you questioned Oliver's obsession with Felix before, you shouldn't be now. Like, I loved it. No, I loved this scene. I think that it was just, I don't know, refreshing to me in a way when I very first watched it, because there's a lot of films, there's a lot of shows where, to me, the love, the love, the possession, the obsession. Somehow people deny it, you know? I don't know. I think about, there are things that people are always going to deny when it comes to the gays. I often think about how when The Last of Us DLC came out, where Ellie kisses her best friend, and just the comments at the time the year came out, I remembered this. I was there. I was reading these comments as a baby gay and seeing people say, oh, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean Ellie's gay. She full on smacked her best friend on the mouth with her lips and they were snogging and they were gonna run away together, and you still had people in denial. So to me, I don't know, I love these scenes where I'm like, you cannot deny, you cannot. The director, the actors have smacked you over the head with a barrel of bricks. You cannot say that it is not what it is. But also, I throughout, I kind of love how wet the film is. I will come back to this, but I love how wet it is. Like, just the abject, just the grossness. I think that also is a massive thing that makes the film just pop for me. And so, whilst they're preparing for a cocktail party the next day, again, Oliver, it seems, has appeared early. He's out in the garden with Elspeth, who is obviously the hostess. And it's the golden hour, the sun's setting on them. She's in this nice lavender cocktail party dress with martini, I don't remember. Anyway, she has a drink and Oliver's there in his black tie attire, and because he's early outdoors, they're having a one-to-one conversation where, first of all, I think it's Elspeth is blabbing about her daughter again in a way that these are not nice people, even though I love her because she's hilarious. But Elspeth is talking about Venetia, talking about her being sexually incontinent, saying, oh, I think a partner would sort her out. Boy, girl, I don't mind. I was a lesbian once, you know. Again, she gets the funniest lines. I was a lesbian once, you know, but I found it far too wet. Men are so nice and dry, she says. And she also talks about Venetia's bulimia. That's the thing that she's hoping a partner would sort her out for. But then, also in this scene, we do not see Pamela again in the film because Elspeth explains that Mr. Catton ordered her peeled away in the early hours of the morning to not make a scene. So, after hearing this, we do see this kind of... I think we see this thinly veiled alarm on Oliver's face. Barry Keoghan he has this look away that looks concerned, and we can understand why. Again, we have seen, it has been outlined to us that the Catton's pity is all they get. They don't really belong there. It's only fun for them as long as their charity case stays of interest to them. And clearly Pamela was out, and the way that Elspeth described her as peeled away to not cause a scene, this clearly affects Oliver. Although after hearing this, Oliver actually uses this opportunity, it seems, this one-on-one with Elspeth, to say, oh, you know, you don't... I think that Pamela was quite emotionally manipulative to you and the family. And Elspeth's eyes kind of light up in this excited thrill of gossip, I suppose. And she says, oh, I'm so glad you said that. I felt so terribly guilty for saying that, but it makes me feel like I wasn't being paranoid that you've said that now. And so Oliver has his little hook in with this comment that Elspeth seems impressed by him and charmed by his observations and says, you're so perceptive. I'm so glad. I feel like this scene was such a linchpin for the eventual outcome of how Oliver plays the family, because the funny thing is that obviously it's Lord Catton's family, but often in these situations, these kind of aristocratic situations of family, obviously the woman is the hostess. The woman makes the decisions. In a fair few scenes, it is definitely Elspeth taking control. And I've just realised I've been calling James Catton Jacob Catton. I am a buffoon. Anyway, in a fair few of these scenes, it's not James taking control of the situation, even though he is the one with the kind of financial and then the ancestral power, but it's Elspeth. Elspeth suggests the Midsummer Night's Dream party. Elspeth suggests that Oliver stay. Elspeth is the one who clearly wanted Pamela gone the most, as much as she wanted to take her on as the charity case. And so this scene, in some ways, feels just kind of like a prelude to the upcoming scenes. But in other ways, this is the real start of the downfall of the Catton family, I would say. So after this wretched little gossip sesh with Elspeth, Queen of the Sauce, well, Oliver just turns into a full-on strumpet. Cum guzzling from the tub is no longer enough, apparently, because after this info that Elspeth confided, who should come drifting by in the inky twilight but Venetia, dressed in a virginal white nightgown, like every girl in a gothic house deserves, and she drifts by like a moonlit cloud, seemingly unaware, but then she turns to Oliver's window where he's watching, and she seems to like it. She seems to like that he's watching her. So we cut to the next scene where he's followed her down to the grounds and she's sat down again after seeing that she's seen him seeing her. She seems to like it. It implies that she was then waiting for him to follow her after drifting by in this way that is quite come get me. In their conversation, he seems to take a controlling approach, which is dubiously consensual. I think it's important to say that the following scenes have a dubious consent to them because of the way that Oliver specifically does take control with this kind of dominating language, this sexual power play, where Venetia never says no. She never says, I don't want this. The closest to it is specifically when the scene culminates in this menstrual cunnilingus, and she says before that it's not really the right time, as Oliver starts to go down on her, and she explains she's on her period, basically. But, you know, I've got to wonder why she went wandering in a white nightdress. Again, she's in her gothic house. It's her home. She deserves to serve the white gothic nightdress. He goes down on her and explicitly says, don't worry, I'm a vampire. He takes her blood on his fingers and then has her taste it as well, which I think is important with the vampire associations and the way that often in vampire media you'll have a transferal of blood, be how to turn another vampire, or definitely a blood exchange is a big thing that often happens. And again, for this scene, it's something grotesque, something that is dubious consent. But, well, it goes down well enough. They've clearly started something, and Oliver has his first strong sexual hold on one of the Catton family members. Farley sees this from his room and says, you stupid little boy. And so it's implied then the next morning that he's told Felix about this. Felix is obviously not happy about Oliver starting a relationship with his sister in any way. However, Oliver lies to him. It shocks me because Farley is part of the family. And Somehow Oliver does manage to twist the situation into, Venetia came onto me. I didn't want to embarrass her when I had to push her away. And Felix believes him. And it surprises me a lot. And it definitely then, in terms of the narrative, does again put Farley and Oliver as almost mirrors to each other. Like they are parallels. They are both in a position that is apparently that fragile. Again, Farley is part of the Catton family. It is also his house. And yet he cannot then apparently just be believed over Oliver. So, as I say, it shows that they are both apparently that vulnerable, and showing that Farley is in this position is important for following scenes as well, which otherwise you would maybe think this is too ridiculous. I know I'm watching a thriller here, but please, like, what? You wouldn't just believe this rando over your family. But this is an early scene to show that yes, Oliver is gaining that power, and Venetia clearly won't tell, but also he seems to have almost been a good influence on Venetia because of her aforementioned bulimia from Elspeth. And the breakfast the morning after, before he has to lie to Felix, she certainly does keep her food down, again with these very particular sexually charged looks from Oliver across the table. And I don't think that this is quite enough for Oliver at the time to feel that he needs to silence Farley, so to speak. But not long after, there is yet another awkward dinner in which it's a cocktail party. Elspeth is playing hostess and they're at the dinner, and it's a very ritualistic way of having a dinner party where Venetia says, oh, Felix has scared you off then, but Oliver doesn't have the time to explain himself or weave a tale because next to him, I just know this woman as Kitty from BBC's Ghosts, so I think just so I don't have to look up names, I'm just going to keep calling her Kitty. I'm sorry. But she's next to Oliver on his left or right. I don't know these aristocratic rituals. What do you think I'm in, a cult? But she says, excuse me, you need to talk to the person on your left, I think she says. And again, he's then put into this position where he is not of this world. He does not understand the ritual. And that conversation ends very awkwardly, where he doesn't understand what she's really telling him. And you can audibly hear her say, save me, when apparently the time that is not marked in any audible visual way has come for her to then talk to somebody else, apparently due to how this dinner works. But as part of this evening, there's a karaoke, and we have Oliver try and make a move on Farley to get him under his control. And they're lying down together, seemingly drunk to a degree. And the direction, again, it's kind of giving this really sexually charged energy where I see in this scene a lot of Barry Keoghan purposely looking at Archie Madekwe's lips. You know, that classic body language, like, if they keep looking at your lips, it means they want to kiss you. And there's a lot of that happening in this scene. And it's the most soft-spoken Farley's ever been to Oliver. And Oliver says outright that he basically recognizes that Farley doesn't always feel that he fits in either. And that if he ever wants to talk to him about it, then he can do that he can be an open ear to Farley. And Farley then seems to be soft on the idea where they're lying inches from each other's faces, lying back on the sofa in a little bit of a drunken haze. And Farley says, okay, and nods at him, and they laugh, and it seems like maybe their bond is going to go somewhere more amicable. But my snaky boy, I love him so much. What Farley does instead He signs Oliver up for a karaoke song. And again, it's still very amicable. You don't know what's going to happen. They play this song. I had to look it up after because I'd never heard of it. It's Pet Shop Boys. So, you know, I think everyone's heard of Pet Shop Boys, but I don't know if everyone's heard of this song, Pay My Rent. And Oliver is hesitant. He's like, I don't know this song. But after the interaction, it's kind of cute, you know, like those scenes in movies where they're like, I don't know how to dance. And then they still dance and have a cute time. But as he sings this song that Farley's chosen for him, it's very clearly a dig. And again, like at Oxford, Farley is kind of stood to the side laughing at his expense because he knows he's put him in the worst position. The scene at Oxford where this happens is specifically when he knows that he is not likely to be in a position to pay for another round of drinks for about 13 other people because he assumes that he's super poor and he laughs at his expense. Felix dives in to save him at that moment, but Felix is not there at the karaoke to do that. So Oliver has to style it out as the room grows awkwardly silent with the fact that Oliver can't sing and the lyrics that he's singing, and they know his situation at the Catton's house. And so Oliver styles it out by saying, "This is your song, Farley, as well. Why don't you come finish it?" Farley styles it out. Farley does know the song, and that is literal and metaphorical that Farley knows the song, and he manages to style it out and get everyone clapping and laughing at him, laughing with him. We get the next sex scene. We don't see it explicitly, but Oliver lets himself into Farley's room again in the nighttime to just also draw more comparisons between Oliver and vampires, that they're nighttime visits, that they are sexually charged visits. And we don't see specifically what happens because the choice is to have a very close-up shot of Farley and Oliver's faces mirroring each other. Much like the Incubus painting, The Nightmare. Oliver is at first shown on Farley's bed, sitting on top of him, and it's just a silhouette. But the rest of the scene plays out that their faces almost mirror each other, one on top of the other. So again, there is this interesting, deliberate decision to keep having them mirror each other like they are each other's parallels. They're both in similar positions of vulnerability. Again, in a scene of dubious consent, because it's Farley. Of course, at first, he's like, what are you doing in my room? But with this kind of dominating language and the way that he plays Farley sexually, where he couldn't play him emotionally, when he uses sex, the scene does go the way that Oliver hopes that it does in terms of his power over Farley. It's still antagonistic. It's still very heated. Like, I actually love it. Again, So I feel that, yeah, a lot of people are going to come out of this being a lot more heavy on the Felix and Oliver dynamic. But I think they're fools because Farley and Oliver is delicious. It really is. Just there's an interesting, sorry, every time that I say, oh, it's not gonna be too academic, it's just my film review, it's not gonna be like an essay or something, I come out with like some kind of fucking quote like this. But there is a quote from Oscar Wilde: everything in the world is about sex, except sex. Sex is about power. And I do feel that that really sums up a lot of the sex scenes in this movie, even the ones that are a bit more metaphorical than they are literal. But after this scene, it cuts to the morning after, and Farley and Oliver do not wake up in the sunlight the next morning. What we actually see and hear is many whispers. We have this shot of Venetia and Felix, and then Oliver all whispering and looking down the spiral staircase as we hear James Catton shouting at Farley to get out, and an argument about him stealing, and Elspeth then looks up at the kids on the staircase and they hurry away. And the follow-up scene, it's explained that Farley has been dismissed from the house for stealing valuables and trying to sell them to an auction where the auctioneer is a close friend of James Catton's. So this all seems highly suspicious, shall we say. But our attention is kind of immediately redirected after this by Elspeth going on about herself, as usual. But also then just dropping in that she's going to Pamela's funeral. It's a bit of a shock. It's a little bit of a shock. Specifically then when Elspeth says she'd do anything for attention. Again, how do people come out of this film thinking that the Cattons are really nice and innocent and would really like to hang out with them? So now we get to Act 3 where the major spoilers lie. So if any of this sounds appealing, if any of this has wet your whistle, so they say, I don't know who they are because it's not me, to be honest. I don't know why I said it. But go now, go watch Saltburn, and then come back to hear the conclusion of this sorry tale. So I would say the final act of the movie starts at Oliver's birthday. So earlier in the movie, his birthday was discussed. The Cattons kind of took over the idea of making a party for him because James wanted to wear his suit of armor and Elspeth was hostess mode saying, oh, we could do Midsummer Night's Dream themed. Wouldn't that be lovely? And you could wear your armor. And as I say, they've taken over this idea of a birthday party for him. And similarly, Felix has once again taken it upon himself to sort of take over Oliver's birthday day when he says, get dressed, wear something nice, we're going on a road trip. And so they're in the car. We don't know where they're going. There's been no hints dropped, but at some point during the journey, Oliver looks around at a sign and realizes where they are, seemingly. And Felix confesses where they're going, and he says that he answered a call from his mum when Oliver was otherwise preoccupied. He had a conversation with her where he planned to bring him home for his birthday. Even after all Oliver's told him about his parents, Felix then says, no, she sounds like she's really getting her act together. She's been wondering where you are. She's going to be so happy to see you. I think you really need to mend this relationship. This sounds like the right time. He's really taken it upon himself to be Oliver's hero, to mend the family relationship. And the drive just lingers because there's a build-up as we drive through this very normal kind of neighborhood where we get to the front door and Felix does say, wow, this is a really lovely place. It looks like she really has got her act together. And then the penny starts to drop when the door opens to this very normal looking woman, just this very healthy, normal, the most mumsy looking woman that you can imagine. And she says, oh, Dad's in the back. He'll be so happy to see you. Remember, the reason that Oliver is at Saltburn is because Felix felt so sorry for him because he'd just said his dad died of an overdose. And I love this scene. It's such a deliciously cringe scene. Like, you want to get out. Even if you don't have a great opinion of Oliver at this stage, even when you are in, probably quite rightly, God, I hate everyone in this movie mood. It's just so flippin' frightening to see. Again, I know Jacob Elordi from Euphoria, where he plays quite a scary man, scary teenager. And this really comes through in this scene in a similar way of just that very dangerous smile, this grin that is starting to get a little bit manic looking, but he is obviously beautiful enough to kind of pull off that it's a friendly grin. And as his mother and his father sit in the room, Oliver is just I can't remember if there's like an audible heartbeat that's added as like, you know, kind of like a non-diegetic sound or something. But it's very tense, clearly, for him to have not only his lies to Felix unraveled, but also to have Felix present to hear the lies that he has been telling his parents. He Oh gosh, again, Jacob Elordi just has this manic grin that is very zoomed in to see the close up of it, and his kind of disbelief, the eyebrow raises as he smiles to hear his mum say, "Oh, top scholar at Oxford, we're so proud. Oh, and he's in the rowing team." Again, the back and forth, Jacob Elordi, "Oh, he's in the rowing team." Oh, because he's been telling so many lies, and this is when it all comes crumbling down and crashes in this very bright, normal looking household. Or even down to apparently that he's not an only child. That's the thing that's thrown in there, is that he has sisters, and he has to lie again in front of his parents when Felix says, "Oh, you told me you're an only child." He goes, "No, I've told you about my sisters a lot." I love it and I hate it. And Felix wants to drag it out. Something else as another element to this that I really enjoy is actually the way that Felix then will not let Oliver crawl out of it. He, at some point, gets up suddenly and announces that he feels really, really sick. And obviously, we, as the audience, are like, "I bet you do, freaking liar." Because this just really came out of the blue for everyone. There's no hints towards this. So again, you know, if you've stuck around without seeing the film, that's probably one of the major things that happens, that it's a shame to have heard about it before and to not go in with no idea. But yeah, so Felix then tells him, "Oh, just go take a pill or something, Oliver. We'd love to stay," because his parents want him to stay for cake that apparently they've spent all morning cooking, and we don't get to see the continuation of this mental torture from all of his lies just unraveling. But we do then get to see the silent car ride home and the desperation once they get back to Saltburn, and Oliver tries to talk to Felix, tries to win him back, and then says, "Oh, you won't tell my parents or anything, will you?" And Felix just says, "Of course I won't. Shit's dark enough already." Damn right, I bet it was too late to cancel. This birthday party is everything. I think they did end up showing it in, you know, kaleidoscopic kind of snatches during the trailer, because it is beautiful. It is flippin' such heckin' party of 2006 vibes. A lot of the rave lights, a lot of the music playing, and also just, again, it I think I said this earlier, it's got such kind of Gen 1 Skins vibes. I think that's the main one I keep thinking of because of the Britishness, but even maybe like some of the early Gossip Girl episodes, there's such opulence, and everyone clearly has dressed up to be so ready for a night of hedonism and absolute carelessness. I think again, all I do is use flippant essay words in my casual reviews, but it's bacchanalian, you know? It really is just a godlike level of alcohol and food and revelry. And I don't know for sure. I would have to watch it back, but it would not surprise me if we saw a lot of like sexual behavior in the background. Drugs we definitely see on screen as well. Just exactly the kind of night where you just expect everyone to go home with just like the most banging headache and vomiting everywhere. Throughout this night, Felix is very clearly avoiding Oliver, as you would. Like, he was allowed that moment of diplomacy. But when Oliver is stalking through the halls, and his outfit is this it's this white shirt with these kind of maybe fig leaf looking decorations along the lapels. It's quite an open shirt, and these little antlers. And Felix, when he finds him, is dressed in this white vest with some golden angel wings. I don't know Midsummer Night's Dream, but I don't know if these are characters. When Oliver finds Felix in a boxed off room, like a real place to hide, he's smoking with, I don't know, maybe 3 other people. Again, like, it's very interesting and sad to see this lad who then, again, I got no sympathy for anyone in this movie, but Jacob Elordi is just so good at just being so beautiful, and he's just been so exuberant, and just the lust for life that he has throughout this film. You can see why everyone loves him, but essentially he has then closed himself off in this little room with only a very small circle of people. And when Oliver finds him, it is the most antagonistic that Felix ever is in the film, when he just says bluntly for him to fuck off. And so Oliver stalks around the house in his fawn outfit and is in the party looking just completely like he doesn't belong. He's like that meme of Keanu Reeves, I think it is, just stopped dead in the middle of a party where everyone else is just gone because they're dancing in the moment, and he is the loneliest boy in a room full of people. We also have another horrible moment of cringe of, again, even if your sympathy for Oliver has gone, is dead in the water, then it's horrible to have this moment where it's his birthday party. And so, of course, the captains have had someone make him a lovely birthday cake and have everyone gather on the halls, on the stairs, to sing him happy birthday. But as they get to the happy birthday, dear, they don't know him, do they? Who is he? And so you hear someone loudly say, "I've forgotten his name," and they all laugh, and Oliver's face drops as he blows out the candles. And we advance to see him again stalking Felix around the house. He seems to have picked up a lady friend and is escorting her to the maze that the family have on the grounds. And then we have some beautifully filmed scenes with this very dead-eyed expression that, again, I've just gotta praise Barry Keoghan's performance as Oliver, of just the moments that he can look so cute, you know, very pitiable. He's got these baby blue eyes. There's a moment during this party where Farley bounces back. Farley, who's been dismissed from the house, he bounces back for this party because of course he does. And he's initially disguised from head to toe in a donkey outfit. And when he first bounces in front of Oliver, Oliver says, "Hello, Farley," despite him being covered. And Farley says, "How did you know it was me?" Oliver says he noticed the signet ring. And during this conversation, which is less of a conversation and more of a taunt from Farley to Oliver, where I think as well, that this must have been intentional potentially, or just a happy accident, that Felix and Farley, Jacob Elordi and Archie Madekwe respectively, have like a solid 7 inches, it feels like, over Barry Keoghan's Oliver. And so in this scene, the power is switched again in just a basic way. You hate it, but sometimes someone is just taller than you, and it does cause you to have to look up at them in a way that immediately makes you feel less powerful. And that's what happens in this scene. When Farley tells him that this is his home and he will always come back, and that to Oliver, it's just a dream that he's going to be remembering for years, wondering how to get it back, but he won't because he doesn't belong. It's just so good, this seesaw of Oliver and Farley and the differences between them as well as the similarities, that even though they are clearly always going to be in these similar positions of vulnerability in their place in this world of aristocracy, Farley has that edge of it is his family. But anyway, back to the meat of the night, as it were. So Felix is in the center of the maze where Oliver has stalked him with his lady friend, who's just dressed in this quite simple fairy outfit. I can't lie, that is probably what I would end up doing for Midsummer Night's Dream as well. Just sexy fairy. But when he comes in and sexy fairy lady is in a position to see him coming in after them, she leaves. She seems to think that it was some sick arrangement they had for Oliver to watch and leaves on that note. And so Oliver drunkenly beseeches Felix one last time to win him back over. He goes into this slurring monologue that everyone performs for Felix and that he's just sorry his performance wasn't good enough. And as Oliver looks up at him, leaning against this looming Minotaur statue, this faun and this angel and this Minotaur statue, it's such a good scene. I want a poster of it. I feel like it's such an interesting thing. In fact, with the antlers, what you could say is that Oliver looks like a faun, and to see him very deliberately in this fawning position over Felix as he sits there in his angel wings looking like freaking Juliet from Romeo plus Juliet. It's such a defining scene of the movie, I think. And then this final plea from Oliver obviously does not work. How could it? But Felix then just says, "You make my fucking blood run cold." And the music then has this very tragic finality to it, but very soft and somber as well. I don't remember, but I think it's just kind of quite isolated mid-key piano. I don't know music, I don't know why I talk about it. But again, the important thing is that it has this note to it of just a kind of an end. And Oliver takes his bottle of alcohol and pushes it towards Felix and then goes to vomit in the corner. And we get a few more scenes of Oliver walking around in the dawn hours alone until he flops down to sleep. The next morning, he wakes up in the house to doors slamming and panicked voices and this atmosphere of unease. He goes out to the balcony rather than going outside into the halls and sees outside all of the dredges from the party, all of the litter and the night after, and lots of people shouting and running. We get that narration, that voiceover that we haven't had for a long time of what is clearly future Oliver, and he says, "You don't need to be told, do you?" And there's this great scene of him walking through the hall slowly, building up to the moment with this narration. And we see the back of Elspeth's head walking through the maze. And it's great because it feels like he's talking to the audience. It feels very meta because you just know the way that it's all been painted and the panic and the unease in the atmosphere. As soon as Oliver wakes up, you think Felix is dead. Oh my God, Felix is dead. And Elspeth screams, then you know he's dead. And there's this really good shot. That sounds so patronizing. That's this really good shot of then just, it's a tilted camera angle of Elspeth standing over just all we can see of the body of Felix is just his bent angel wings. And Farley runs in and Venetia runs in, and then James, his father, runs in, and the melodrama has been so peak that it sometimes means that you can't take things as seriously. But I think for these characters that have been frequently, specifically Elspeth and James, that have been frequently so stiff, so cold and judging, to see James in particular, the family patriarch, just in this horrible disbelief where he goes down to his son where no one else has approached the body and starts sort of like gently shaking him and nudging him and saying, "Oh, what, you silly boy, where's your jumper? You're going to be so cold. We need to get him inside. He's cold. Where's his jumper?" It's horrible, actually. Maybe I am soft, but I found it actually, yeah, really upsetting. The denial of when you see the body. And we don't see, we the audience, the camera is never tilted in a way that we see Felix's corpse. As I say, this entire scene is then just, the camera is tilted and we just see his angel wings. What follows is then one of my favorite scenes from the movie. It is their breakfast, which they have immediately after finding Felix's body. This kind of routine, this ritual is still playing out. And there's a lot of denial in the way that people are conversing, specifically Elspeth. James is pretty much silent, although he adds bits and bobs to the conversation. But then from what you've seen from the rest of the movie, he then doesn't tend to add a lot to conversation in general. Again, it's an interesting note on the power of the household that Elspeth is the lead in conversation. She's always the one with the topics, and she sort of nods to her husband to encourage him to talk. It's that kind of marriage. And so it's mostly Elspeth leading this conversation of denial, talking about how nice the party was. But then I wouldn't say that the movie lingers too much on the tragedy and the heart-stopping disbelief of Felix's death for us, the audience, because not too long after we hear that the police have been called, because Duncan, the head of the house staff, comes in and says, "Oh, the police are having trouble, sir." And James says, "Trouble with what?" And Duncan says, "They keep getting lost in the maze." So much of the comedy of this movie is just the shock of the moment just being broken. There's a lot of things that they wouldn't be so funny, but the atmosphere is just so well done. The tension of the denial in this breakfast scene and just how fragile it is, that it can just be so easily broken with the silliness of the police keep getting lost in the maze so they can't recover Felix's body. That definitely got quite a few laughs at the screening I went to. This is also, interestingly, the very first mealtime after all of these awkward other meal times where it's become a running theme that every time they sit down for dinner, Oliver is reminded that he doesn't fit in. And this is the very first mealtime where that doesn't happen. He eats normally, voraciously, even in comparison to every other occasion sat at this dining table. And he and Elspeth are leading the conversation again of normal things of, "Oh, the party was lovely. Oh, the cake was nice. And, oh, I never got to have any cake in the end. It's always the way of these things. You spend so much time organizing and then you don't really get to enjoy it." Farley is not eating. He's sort of really trying to hold it together and failing, where he then is shouted at by James to stop with his bloody American emotion. We don't need it. Something along those lines. But again, just a moment of othering Farley through his Americanisms, his other heritage. And then Venetia is not eating. She is pouring wine and just, it's another one that I think I've got a little prediction that we're going to see a lot of gifs of this going around. It's that scene of just the unhinged, just uncaring, like, because you just can't see anything around you, where she has a wine glass and she's got an entire bottle of red wine next to her and she keeps pouring it and pouring it into this glass until it overflows. And then when she takes a drink from it as well, she's shaking and she lights a cigarette and she's shaking and the wine glass is then tipping onto her white top. Duncan comes back to say, shall I shut the curtains, sir? And James is very, just get on with it. Just don't talk to me. Just do what you need to do. His final plea is to Elspeth. Again, the one who often has the power, the one who is the main person in the household to be taking on charity cases as she sees them, but also because she wants to see herself as a good person. And James says, don't you dare look at her. And I think personally it's because that obviously James does love his wife, I think, like a lot. And, you know, that should be obvious, but in a lot of family dramas where everyone is so stiff and aristocratic, you do often end up questioning the love in the marriage when people often marry for positions and, you know, ancestral power. But then I think when Farley goes to Elspeth, I don't think we get to see her face if she is then wanting to be on his side. But I think James knows that if Elspeth were on Farley's side, it would be enough that if she said so, he would let him stay. But when he says, don't you dare look at her, it's enough to frighten Farley into silence, and he's kicked from the family for good. Oliver is the only one left, and Farley is not coming back even after that chat they had at the party where Farley firmly said at the time, tauntingly, that this is my home and I will always come back. Not this time. This is the last we see of him. However, he is still out there. I'm just saying. I do feel like Venetia's character faded into the background a little bit after the dinner party where she says, oh, Felix scared you off then. But after Felix's funeral and the fact that Oliver's still there, there's a silly scene again where Oliver asks Elspeth, oh, what font did you choose for his gravestone? Kind of reminds me of this obsessive fan behavior. You know, when there are some unhinged fans for certain celebrities that want to know weird little details like what font did you choose for their gravestone. And the way that Rosamund Pike's Elspeth delivers Times New Roman is quite funny again, and I think because of the shock factor. But it's a comment that makes Venetia just look suddenly like she's snapped out of a dream and is also wondering, why is Oliver here? So we then move on to the scene, which is another one of my favorites. It's such a flippin' snappy pace that the third act of the film follows. And she's in the bath. Again, this kind of what's become, especially with this scene, a bit of a microcosm of Oliver's invasiveness in the house, because obviously it's a bath, it's an intimate area. And every time that Oliver has been in there, it's been quite creepy. Again, this invasive possessiveness that he has over the family. But Venetia is a wreck. She still has makeup running down her face, and this is presumably a long time after Felix's funeral. Time gets very, very snappy and hazy in the final act of the film. Everything to do with time is kind of something that you have to infer from the scenes following. But it's been a long time, but Venetia's face is still caked with makeup. The nail polish is black and chipped, like it's been there for a long time, and she's just done nothing with it. And she seems drunk as well in the bath. And there's again a power play that Oliver carries out, and it's just, she's ranting in a way, but kind of in this hazy, whatever, what does any of it matter way initially. She says how her father is comparing Oliver to an insect, specifically a spider, weaving webs around everything, and hinting that obviously James is also getting sick of Oliver being around. And then she says, "Don't be cross. I don't think you're a spider. I think you're a moth." And I found this very interesting in a really pretentious literature student way. The moth does then sound like mouth, and she does again specifically say eating your holes into everything. And we've seen so many scenes and heard many bits of dialogue referring to this consuming nature. Even early on, when obviously Felix is talking about what Farley said he saw, and he phrases it as, "Farley said you were practically eating each other." During that scene, the transferal of blood was then something that did then speak to the nature of vampire thrall, maybe. And she was then enthralled by him, even when she thought that Felix had scared him off of then interacting with her again. She didn't cause trouble for him. And she then seems very, very aware what she said when she said eating your holes into everything, because as Oliver then eggs her on almost, he doesn't say a lot to her during this scene. I think that a lot of what he does come out with is just encouraging her to speak more and more and more. And there is almost like a draining quality to it, again, in that vampire way, because of the way that she starts in a very silly, drunken way. Again, when she's talking about her dad calling him a spider, she flicks water playfully into his face and goes, "Spider-Man." And then as she goes on and on thinking about him and his place in their house, and every day since the start of the summer he arrived, she gets angrier and angrier, and this anger seems to drain her until Oliver leans in and kisses her until she covers her mouth, and it almost feels like he consumed the last breath that she had left to hate him and be angry at him. And the way that she covers her mouth, it to me just reads like she's disgusted with herself. And then we get to the foreshadowing from the earlier scene when the room's bathed in red light from the drawn curtains, and the wine spilling down her top and spilling from her mouth, and the overflowing, because we then cut to the scene where it's inferred that she took her own life in the bathtub. She's then bathed in red, literally in the bath in red, and she's dead. It's such a good thematic circle that in the final scenes, when it's revealed to us that the narration from the start was Oliver talking to a medically sedated Elspeth, that he then kills her whilst revealing how he killed everyone else by then wrenching the ventilating tube from her mouth. And it's because she invited him back. Again, much how Felix insisted that he come back to Saltburn, she also cannot help herself. When she sees him in a coffee shop many a year later, she says, you must come stay at Saltburn again. They all invite him into their lives, whilst treating him like an interloper. They can't help but invite him in because of their need to feel good about themselves. And again, the method of death of the ventilator tube being ripped from her mouth. We love that all of the kills are mouth-related. Again, from that vampire theming. Venetia's kind of killed with a kiss. Before the razor blades, of course. Felix, obviously, the bottle of alcohol. And then finally, Elspeth with her ventilator. Not James, though. I guess he died of old age. It's a little unclear with Elspeth's phrasing. I feel that it was very fitting that Elspeth was Oliver's final victim, Yes, this vampirism, this needing to be invited in, all of these deaths through the mouth, all of the sexual transgressiveness between the cum-sucking scene in the bar and the menstrual cunnilingus, and just all of his words, all of that making holes in everything, and how he drained the family. It does surprise me somewhat just because of what I've experienced in other media, I suppose, that there wasn't more focus on food imagery. Again, mealtimes are very important for often in the early mealtimes, making Oliver seem like an outsider. His first mealtime at Oxford, massive outsider. With his only companion being that scary boy who's also in the position as Oliver of not fitting in. The first breakfast at the Catton House when he doesn't even know how to get his food, and then has to sheepishly send back his eggs as they're too runny. The mealtime with Pamela and Oliver understanding how precarious his position is. The mealtime where Farley is dismissed because his position was also similarly precarious. And then finally, in that scene as well with Farley's final dismissal, the part where that's the one mealtime you see Oliver eating normally, eating enthusiastically almost. Elspeth at that mealtime, of course, as Felix's body is being wheeled past the hall with these red curtains, is also eating, but still in her stilted way that she always has done, is still as part of that denial. And yeah, as I say, it's the only mealtime that you end up seeing Oliver just eating it all normally. And again, all sorts of specific dialogue that bring up this consumption. When Farley says to Felix, we don't see the exact scene of Farley telling Felix, but when Felix tells Oliver, it's all about the he said, she said. When Felix tells Oliver, Farley said you two are practically eating each other regarding the menstrual cunnilingus scene. Important. And from Venetia in the bathtub scene when she is drunk with grief and also alcoholism from after the grief, and she says to him when she finally gets angry with Oliver, and she says to him, you ate him right up and you licked the fucking plate. Just all of these bits of dialogue that point towards Oliver's more cannibalistic nature in the kind of social sense that becomes a lot more real, obviously, when we reach the climax of the film. And of course, he says himself during the menstrual cunnilingus, I'm a vampire. I think as well, this is part of it, obviously, because, like, this isn't a research review, but vampire as we know it today is actually still quite a new concept, and there are other creatures that relate to it throughout history. But again, this is not giving you research stuff, I'm just saying. But I bring it up because I thought I saw a pretty clear visual parallel between Oliver sat atop of Elspeth before he pulls the ventilator from her throat and the incubus. It might be what the painting's called. I will put a picture if I can. And even the way that Venetia is left in an entirely red tub that feels, Bath of Blood feels very referential to vampires these days. And I suppose, again, on the more pretentious, you have to have a bit more of a experience with the genre side of things. Saltburn's name. Salt is obviously the barrier against demons in a lot of this media. And finally, on this point, I suppose, the monologue at the end as he rounds off his tale to Elspeth of saying that they were all like spoiled dogs or pigs. I think it was dogs, I forget. But basically that they were all spoilt with no natural predators. Well, almost none. And again, vampire-wise, I feel like this is something that is brought up a few times in a fair few bits of vampire media. The idea that humans are the apex predator, but then vampires are more apex. I just love the aesthetic, the kind of set dressing, and definitely the direction, and the fact that this is one of those movies where so many scenes you just want to rip them and make them a desktop background, like that. There are just so many photographic scenes here. My favorites are when Oliver follows Felix into the maze, and this kind of, like, again, it feels a little bit referential to maybe like Judas and Jesus imagery, where he is grabbing his shirt and falling down drunkenly, and the Minotaur in the middle of the maze is staring down at them both, and Jacob Elordi has these golden small angel wings on. He looks kind of like Juliet in Romeo plus Juliet, and obviously Oliver has his little antlers on. And I love that scene. I feel like it's just such a visual. There's such a good thing about the height difference between, not me talking about height difference, oh dear, but there's something just really visually nice about these scenes again, where it's such a homoerotic film. But Farley and Felix, I don't know their heights, but they are both much taller than Oliver. Barry Keoghan, it means that he can just, as I said earlier, all of these actors can just pull off such a scary, cold face. But Barry Keoghan is the best at this role of sometimes he can pull off this scary face, but actually some of the more fascinating, scary, unnerving faces that he pulls in this film for me are to do with the height difference. I think there's a lot of times he's either looking up at Farley or looking up at Felix in this way that, from their angle, are they getting the Kubrick stare? The direction that we, the audience, often see that stare from, it looks almost begging. His head is kind of face on for us, but his eyes are clearly looking up at Felix or Farley. And from that angle, I feel that he must also look quite threatening. And again, I feel like these are such good dynamics. But funnily enough, Venetia also gets this in the scene with the menstrual cunnilingus. How many times can I say menstrual cunnilingus in this flipping video? But it is, as I say, a similar thing where he is looked down on. Or even Elspeth, again, she's unconscious. She is knocked out on sedatives for whatever has befallen her body by the end of the film. But the way that he sensually creeps up from her feet before he sits on top of her in that incubus-like way and wrenches the tube from her, again, I just think it's interesting, these scenes, because it's almost like, again, it's all planned, it's all intentional, that he puts himself in a position where these aristocrats can look down on him and then completely underestimate him and his ability to see the details from that low on the ground. And it's mocking and also, again, just predatory in this way that just, oh, it doesn't have to flip and be said. You just see it, and I love it. I love it. Anyway, if any of this lurid, erotic, vampiricness appeals, go watch Saltburn, and I will see you next time that I watch a movie that I have as much to rant about. Enjoy! You think you're getting away, I will prove you wrong. I'll take you all the way, stay another song, I'll blow you all away. Hey. It's murder on dance floor, but you better not kill the groove. Hey, hey, it's murder on dance floor, but you better not steal the moves. DJ, gonna burn this goddamn house right down.